It's weird how important this life is, considering how short it can be. By the merit of many gods, this life is a test, one that determines which one you should be sent to next, which afterlife you should be a part of. Despite the fact that this afterlife would be potentially an eternal one large mistake could permanently bar you from entry. As harsh as you may see this, there is a logic behind this decision. But what lacks this logic are those barred through no choice of their own. See, many undead, in fact I would say almost all undead, with only a few exceptions, deserve their condition. But some of them have no say, want, or control over them becoming what they are now. And sadly, there is nothing they could ever do to rectify or correct this effect, at least not themselves. When this happens, the spirit created is known as a specter, and it cries for something it could never achieve: redemption. There are a few ways this can happen. The most common is some form of undead cursing them upon death, such as the Wraith, but there are also other methods, such as a curse from a holy figure who is punishing you for some sort of sin, or at least a perceived sin, and holding on to a cursed object for a prolonged period of time. Actually, most of these are some form of curse now that I think about it, but I'm sure there are some exceptions that exist somewhere. But regardless of how it happened, once this figure dies, their soul will transform into a specter, and they shall forever be barred from the afterlife they were supposed to be sent to. The only way to undo this is by having a very powerful person cast a spell akin to Wish, or to have an actual god come down and pardon them. Two things that are incredibly unlikely, and I've only ever heard of the latter once, and that's a story I'll save for later. It does not take long for this person to start feeling the effects of their new nature. Well, other than the incorporeal part, that one's immediate, you're gonna notice that instantly. But the main thing I speak of is their slow fading of humanity. They will slowly start to feel hollow, empty, as if all colour of their life had faded away, and they will crave it above anything else. They would do anything to have any form of feeling again. Even if it's one they hated in life, they would find it desirable now. It's hard to describe, and from what I've heard from their perspective, I can't really do so either. I'm also not going to risk becoming one purely to solve my academic curiosities. The only thing around them that we do know that feels this surge of life is other people. They feel a slight glimpse of the emotions they once had when they are close to them, though it is clouded, it's foggy, as if they were looking through tinted glass, and so they must get closer. They must touch them with their hands, but sadly that could destroy the person, for the touch of the spectre will drain the life regardless of its wants. It's truly tragic, isn't it? Now, after the first time they would have done this, they probably would have realized they killed the person, and so may resist doing so again, that is, if they have any say in the matter. But the things about the souls fading is that, while it's impossible to resist forever, I'm sure there is at least one who has secluded themselves to starve their own anguish for the sake of others, but I know not of them. I should also note that becoming a specter is actually sadly common as well, and affects more than just humanoids. In fact, any creature with even a rudimentary intelligence can become one, such as a smart animal like a cat or a dog. But there are things that are even more intelligent than us, such as dragons, and they can also become one, though I know there are quite a few extra steps and rules in their creation. Those tend to vary a bit too much for me to actually label them correctly. Just know, for a little rule of thumb, that the more powerful the entity, the harder it is for them to become a specter, but they can still become one. And the power of the specter is usually reflective of what it was like in life, actually often a little more so. There's also an interesting variation on the specter, known as a poltergeist. They are very similar in many aspects, such as being blocked from the afterlife and often put in this state against their will. But they have some interesting differences. For a start, they're almost always linked to a location or person, and they have to stay with them regardless of which one it is. The more interesting part is that they are completely invisible to the naked eye and can't physically interact with anything. Instead, they can move objects telepathically, meaning they can throw things around and make items raise in the air, windows will start to slam open and closed, and doors will shake. If this is starting to sound like a familiar haunting, well, that's because it is. These spirits are almost always the ones behind haunts. It's also possible that other creatures can become poltergeists as well. I mean, I feel like cats are just perfect for this sort of thing, being quiet and stealthy, knocking things off of edges just to annoy you or for fun. But I do want to add that poltergeists, unlike regular specters, do not crave emotions like them, and so they do not want to attack things, which is convenient because they actually can't attack things, not in the same manner. The reason they haunt things is often related to how they died. Perhaps someone killed them unlawfully and they have a vendetta against them. They seek to have revenge and annoy them. Or maybe they just want to oversee a loved one and will only actually start doing your classical haunting stuff if they do something they disapprove of or if someone seeks to harm them. But I should get into their capabilities, so let me get in their more obvious ones out of the way first. They're incorporeal, and so they are much harder to hit and harm. This also allows them to move through objects, but they have to keep moving. They cannot stay still when within so. This also gives them a sensitivity to sunlight that makes them often want to hide, and they're only active at night because of this, making them akin to most other creatures in this aspect. The Spectre also has the common undead ability to drain the life from someone. This is nothing to scoff at. Given their implicitly weaker nature, they're actually quite powerful in this regard. They punch a little bit above their belt, so to speak. Then the thing to note about their version of life drain is that they have no control over it whatsoever, meaning that regardless if they want it or not, anyone they touch will be affected by it. But I shall also note, however, that poltergeists do not have this life drain ability, but instead are completely invisible, have the ability to telepathically thrust objects in a violent manner to harm them, and sometimes creatures to cause them harm, flinging them against walls and leaving them there, and so and such. And every now and again, some of them are even strong enough to just punch something with what was their arms, which is, well, it's quite funny, but it's actually rare to see them attempt such a feat. My tale of the Spectre is related to their divine punishment. As with all things, you should take any story with some nuance to the situation. See, I remember one small town run by an abbot, devoted to the goddess Suni. That small town was about to be attacked by a company of hobgoblins, and in order to prepare, they hired a group of sellswords who called themselves the Down and Out. The sellswords fought alongside what few town defenders there were, but were eventually pushed back to the abbey and were cut down to the last. Not a single person survived. But the abbot, in flames of hatred and anger, cursed the sellswords with his dying breath for failing to defend them. Specifically, their leader called the Man's Ire, a man by the name of Gallard, who, upon death, turned into a specter a few days later. This man, Gallard, was not a very nice man, born in unfortunate circumstances and had done some questionable things in his life, but damned from the afterlife for failing? Especially after ignoring the fact he died in his mission to defend said abbey. Well, I think that was completely unfair, as did one of my adventuring companions at the time, a cleric under the goddess Suni. And so, when she learned of his fate, she pulled all the strings she could in order to pardon this man. Of course, she was ignored by every holy order, stating that there were more important things afoot, of which they were sadly correct, but she could not let this stand, and so prayed every day and every night that something could be done about it. Until one day, after a year and a half, it finally worked. The goddess herself, Lady Firehair, appeared and pardoned that man, who finally had his soul put to rest, and joined the goddess in the afterlife. It's a small comfort, something that's only saddened when you learn that not all who are put in such unlucky scenarios will ever have such redemption. And I do sadly feel if it was not in her name, the goddess might not have stepped in at all. And I will ignore the fact that it took a lot of prayers to bring her out in the first place. But I imagine being a god is probably busy work, so I'm not really going to hold that against them. Specters are sad beings in the same way that ghosts are. The difference is that many ghosts and other forms of undeath usually deserve their fate, or at least earn it in some manner or another, but specters are just unlucky. They are often just in the wrong place at the wrong time, and so have a horrid fate because of it. I feel that in a just world, the specter would be one of the first things to never exist. But then again, that world would probably be unrecognizable from our own. Thank you for listening to my tales. I'm the Ashspawn. Feel free to leave a like, comment, or subscribe. It would really mean a lot to me. But, till next we meet, fellow traveller, have a good day.